Hi everyone, I'm Dale Smith, aka Journo Dale, and we're here to talk about Canadian politics. All right, we're here with University of Calgary's Dr. Lindsay Tedds to talk about the budget. I figured we would start with what's good in it. You got a something you've been advocating for a while, which was the automatic filing for low-income people. What else? What else can we say that was good in this budget?
So, I mean, yeah, the auto filing is just very exciting. It's a major expansion of that program from 53,000 people to 2 million. Plus, they're going to move forward with a pilot that they already did in 2016, but they canceled it. So they got to do it again. So I think everybody should be very, very excited with that one. We also saw another year top up to the GST tax credit to help with affordability. I don't agree with the marketing spin of it being a grocery thing because you can spend it on anything you want. But, I guess they needed to have a different name for it so people don't get confused. I don't know. What else do we see in there? I mean, back in the tax supplement, we saw that the general anti-avoidance rule is finally being updated to include an economic substance test.
I did notice the GAR was in there.
Yeah, which is, again, very exciting to me because I've been called crazy for a long time. And so now not so crazy. And the issue there is it will take a decade or more of court cases before we see how well that was written for the courts, because it's going to have to combat against a lot of case law.
Right.
And then, we see the hints of the permanent Canada dental benefit, which is going to be administered by Health Canada, not CRA. Woot, woot. Because we don't want it administered by CRA.
The kludge from the interim program was not great.
No, not at all. So yeah, I mean, there are things in there but I think on the bad side is, I think there's two major concerns. Is one, housing. There's not enough funding for housing. I mean, I don't get the sense that Ottawa fully understands how major of an issue this is in key areas and for key vulnerable communities.
Right.
So that's quite disappointing. We actually don't see any further action on bettering the labor force for the care economy workers, which is particularly relevant for them meeting their $10 a day daycare plan. And so I think that they lost actually some momentum there as they were focusing solely on target dates for that $10 and not actually how do we ensure a good supply and high quality caregiving.
This government have a problem with implementation? You don't say.
Deliverology. Yeah. I gather they just decided it's now in the province's hands, and I think that is not an appropriate thing to do. I think they could have used one of the things that we absolutely need to do is put conditions on the Canada Social Transfer. There's only one condition that's in that big transfer to the provinces from the federal government. One of them could have been wages. For the care economy. And I really hope at some point in time somebody will see the value in conditions in the Canada Social Transfer. And then for me, from more of a big picture, okay, so I mean, in the end, the fiscal house it's not perfect, but it's not bad. Like there's still a lot of fiscal room. The debt to GDP ratio will eventually go down or not because they spend every year. So we'll see. So I'm not
1995.
It's not. Yeah, I'm not going to light my hair on fire. I'm not going to, channel the leader of the official opposition or anything like that. But I am concerned because there were at least two big ticket items missing from this budget, and they're not booked in the fiscal framework either. And that's the Canada Disability Benefit.
Yeah.
Canada. Well, hopefully a benefit.
Okay. Right. Sorry.
Right. Yeah. So that. to achieve the things that they set out in the legislation, the thing's going to have to cost about $8 to $12 billion a year. So we need to really start thinking about where that's going to fit into the framework, or we're going to get into the next budget where they just increase the debt to GDP ratio one more year and then say, oh, but it'll go down later on.
Right.
And then EI reform.
Is that
nothing in there on EI reform?
I know that they've been working on this for a while, and it's been a process, because I know people who were involved in that. But is that something that necessarily needs to be in the budget, because the EI fund is not in general revenue, or just, I don't know if that's
so it's I mean, the pandemic effect is a heavy burden for that fund to bear, right? And because we've been spending surpluses out of the EI fund, because those goes into central revenues, there's not a base in there, right? So in order to expand EI, we need to expand EI. We don't need to go back to 1996 where we, made it almost impossible to access. It needs to actually be expanded, and expanded to people for whom it doesn't currently sit as a stopgap for them. And so that means you're going to have to transfer funds from the fiscal framework into the EI fund, without a shadow of a doubt. How big that is depends on how quick, how fast, whatever. But we need EI reform if we even plan on being recession ready. And, while I don't think we're going to, right now, there's no signs we're going to go into a deep recession, might be a little one, like back in 2015. You remember that little one we had?
Yes.
But, the United States is not doing well. And if that keeps going, gets worse and worse down there, that is a problem that it will hit up here. And then you've got the UK. The UK is a disaster right now, right? And they are a big trading partner as well. I think we forget that. And so those are things. And then, you got a dictator somewhere who could come out and create a war, who knows what could happen, right? So you always want to be ready, and we're not ready at all. And that's a problem.
The other thing I wanted to touch on today was, as I like to say, choices in the budget. A lot of this green tech stuff, was this really the best way to do it? Or would there have been more effective ways for the government to ensure this transition?
I think that is an excellent question that I cannot answer.
Okay.
I mean, it's tax credits. So, you're still leaving the decision in the hands. You're not necessarily picking winners and losers, but you are picking a sector to be, winners and what have you. And we always do kind of prefer that. But whether or not that'll get the emissions reductions, because they're not picking, I have a question about. So I'm a weird economist, right? So I can contradict myself. You shouldn't pick winners and losers, but do we want to in this case? Right.
And I guess it kind of, because there's this desire that we need to keep up with the Americans on what they did with their Inflation Reduction Act. And I just wonder if we're making the right choices, or if the government is kind of being led along a particular path because there's this narrative that we need to meet this, but I don't know if we even can.
So, I mean, when the Inflation Reduction Act was signed back in August 2022, it was clear we had to respond. Maybe not from a climate emissions perspective, but certainly from a competitive thing. And I certainly know one or two tax economists who tell me we always have to compete with the United States on tax rates. So, it's always interesting to see how long that holds up. There was no question that there was going to be something in here. Is this the right way? Is it big enough? Will firms respond? I just don't have a read on the tea leaves on that one.
Okay. And you do mention it's tax credits. And that makes me wonder if we don't see the uptake on those, what that would then do to the fiscal picture if companies in Canada aren't availing themselves. Does that help us in the longer run?
I mean, it helps the fiscal bottom line.
Yeah.
Doesn't exactly help with emissions targets, although that one's a little tricky, because if you remember back when we were dealing with acid rain, right?
Yeah.
And we set up this whole big thing and a cap and trade system. I mean, it only lasted a few years before nobody was using it, because they had made all of the changes and there needed to be no incentives there. So, you know, and you have, in order to take advantage of a tax credit, you have to be profitable.
Right.
So, you know, we are seeing more and more of the juniors out here shifting into renewables. They never make money.
Yeah.
I mean, this is why we have the big problem with
Orphan wells?
Or no, not orphan wells, the mineral expense tax credit,
Okay, yes.
things like that, right? Because, I mean, and you can structure your businesses in any way as to whether or not you can take advantage of these things. So again, not having all of those details, but one thing that I do know about tax credits is that there will be firms that take advantage of them in a negative and nefarious way. And there will be others who should get some sort of support given the climate objectives and who won't qualify. So perhaps in budget 2024, we will see how all of these programs will be morphed to deal with all of these little corner cases.
Right. I mean, my thing with tax credits is I do recall a certain Auditor General's report a few years ago, which was basically saying that, you know, the government just did not track the efficacy of all these tax credits they were putting out.
Correct. They let us do it.
Which, you know, makes me wonder, you know, if the decision is to keep using tax credits, if there's enough awareness on the government side that they need to start tracking this better.
No, because it's mostly used for political purposes, not real economic reasons. Sorry.
Perish the thought.
Perish the thought. I mean, look how many reports, how many journal articles and ink was spilled over trying to demonstrate to the government that the child fitness tax credit and the public transit tax credit were ridiculous, right? It took 10 years before we were able to get those out of the system because they were purely political.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for taking the time to do this. Always a great chat.
Yes, thank you very much for having me.
All right, and we'll do this again. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
And that's everything for this week. Join us again next week for some more Canadian politics. I'm Dale Smith. It's at journo_Dale on Twitter. And don't forget to like the video, share, subscribe, and support us on Patreon. Thanks, everyone.